If you guys can send the chat if I'm audible or not, that would be great. Am I audible? Okay, so, well, first of all, welcome all of you. Uh, Before we begin, I just want to give you a quick shout out to our stream handler, Shashwat here. We will be sitting, looking through your comments that you make in the chat. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Flutter, right? So this talk is, if you call it a talk, is mainly an introduction. So it primarily focuses on those folks who have no idea how app development works, what Flutter is, and have not written a single line of Dart code. So this talk is about that. Uh, what's today's session is about? So first of all, we will look into what this buzzword Flutter is that everybody is excited about. Uh, Next, we will talk about what is different about Flutter that everybody is eager to start using it. We will look into what Flutter is from a developer's perspective. And finally, we will see where Flutter fits in this app development sphere. Okay, so there has been an unprecedented growth in interest and usage in Flutter. Ever since I think it went 1.0 from into 2018, that must be it. Um, the news of Flutter surpassing React Native in terms of number of stars in GitHub repo made news for quite some days in both of the communities. You can also see here that it also passed one of the biggest projects, open source projects, that is the Linux kernel, in the same terms of number of stars in repo. There was a recent tweet, I think 1 or 2 days back, that showed in Google Trends that Flutter just crossed React in terms of search interest. Uh, well, you might say that what is that thing about Flutter that everybody is eager to start learning using it? Well, it turns out that you don't really need to know about native platforms in which you want to deploy your Flutter app. Its user of use gives you a jump start in app development. It is heavily used by startups and teams with small workforce, primarily due to its ability to push and minimum viable project, that is an MVP, due to its fast dev cycle, which is the right ones deploy everywhere feature. Well, let me just give you away my definition of what Flutter is. Flutter is a declarative UI focused custom first, platform independent, open source framework that offers fast production for and native performance for multiple platforms. Well, that's a lot of words to be thrown at you people. So what we're gonna do is take it one by one word and see what that mean, what the words mean. Well, UI focused and custom first. Well, the courtesy of the highly customizable material theming that is, you can say, an expanded version of material design that the material design team introduced back in 2018, where you can still implement your custom themes, but at the same time you can comply with the material design guidelines. This expansion of material design and Flutter's open source code base provides the ability for designers to express themselves through beautiful UIs and developers the confidence to implement them. Uh, so Flutter finally makes real developer designer collaboration possible, and they can so the designers can build UIs and throw them at developers, and the developers can build them instantly without any hesitations. Such is the fact that now, with the presence of Flutter and its power to create beautiful UIs, is this built with Flutter? Is a common question for applications with good US UI, even though it is not made with that in the first place. Uh, Even if you don't have a designer with you, Flutter gives you the confidence just like Green Goblin has here. uh, what if custom design doesn't make you happy? What if you want to make your app so such that its user feel at home? Well, Flutter has high quality implementations of native SDK widgets for Android, following the material design, and iOS for following the human interface guidelines. uh, Flutter uses its own sets of widgets instead of depending upon a system or any kind of bridge or web views, such that it doesn't depend on any type of platform. So all of the widgets that are come out of the comes out of the box from Flutter are built from the ground up from Dart, the language that Flutter apps are written in. So as you can see in this GIF, it is showing an Android app running on Android 10, which looks like something built for iOS. Uh, Next up, something called the Skia rendering engine. Now, Skia is a rendering engine used by Flutter, which is very lightweight in rendering engine, built to paint every pixel that you see in your typical Flutter app. So some of the Flutter developers, what they did is took that feature literally and used that to uh, build generative arts. You can look that up on internet, Flutter generative arts. There are really some cool designs that they have made. So that's that. More info about why Flutter doesn't use uh, native SDK widgets can be read in this article. So you can look that up. It's a good read. Now, platform independent. What we developers really like is implementing the same thing multiple times over and over again in different platforms, right? No, that's exactly what we don't want. That is why the ability of Dart to compile to different architectures and the different flavors of the Flutter engine go hand in hand to deploy Flutter apps to multiple platforms from a single code base. So Flutter apps can compile to ARM32, ARM64 for mobile apps, or for Intel 32-bit or 64-bit for desktops, or plain old JavaScript for the web. Such that so Flutter apps can be deployed on Android, iOS, web, Linux, Windows, Mac OS, or even on Raspberry Pi. There is an article on Medium, I think, about porting the Flutter engine on Raspberry Pi. Uh, So you can look that up if you are interested. I must say though that some of the engines are not intended for production yet. So let me show you a quick demo. Okay, we're back. So this is the app uh, that is running my phone. As you can see, simple app. I hit the plus and the counter increases, right? So turns out you can use the same code. This is a Linux application, the desktop platform I'm using, and this is a web application. You can use the same code over here. This is the same code that is running on both of these areas. So they look and function exactly the same. So I press and hold over here to see the tooltip, and same case for these applications. So you can see how this platform independency works with Flutter. Uh, Another tip, Flutter just recently introduced PWA support. So if you are into that, you can do that too. Can you guys see my code that I'm running on my application phone? Can you see my code that I'm running here? Okay, so I hope you can see my code over here. So this is the starter application that Flutter provides you when you create a project. I have got it running in my phone over here. So you can do the same. You can deploy the same code over on your phone and even on your desktop application and your web application. And the web application has PWA support. So if you are into that, it's good for you. So you can see where this. Hold on. So you can see where this platform independency comes in. Uh, so uh, this year, the Flutter team has decided to go desktop and web first. So we might get some improvements in the developer experience of web and desktop this year. So open source. This by open source, I mean that the code base written in Dart, right from the top level widgets to the bottom level rendering and foundation, are open and well documented. So this entire portion here is for you to dig deep in and tweak it to build something completely new that was not there in the framework in the first place. That is why libraries and packages made by the community implementing functionalities completely new are popping up every day. Now, something in connection to platform independency I was mentioning. So this bottom part over here, as you can see, it is the engine that Flutter uses to render your apps. So in the case of, I think, mobile, that is on Android and iOS, this part is the Dart VM, right? So over here, the Flutter engine, which is the in C++, is backed by the Dart VM. In case if you are deploying on your desktop, it will be swapped by another flavor of the Dart engine known as Dart to native, I think. Yes. um, in the case of web deploying on web, you need Dart to JS. So if, that I was saying that Dart has different flavors of Dart engine has different flavors, so that it enables everyone to deploy apps from a single code base in multiple platforms. This set of tweets by one of Flutter community's recognized members uh, show the point that I'm trying to convey here. So the Entire Flutter SDK is available within a single click from your IDE. It's readable, documented, and you can even edit it. So the docs, whether offline or online, will be there for you every time. When you install Flutter, what you actually did is a Git clone. So if you head on to Flutter installation guide, there will be a alternative instruction for you to do, which is actually a Git clone. If you can look that up, you will see that there is a command saying Git clone flutter.git hyphen b stable, like that. So yeah, the Flutter SDK computer is essentially a cloned repo of the Flutter repository. So, as much I can talk about the features of Flutter, what we really care about is what is it like to build it with, right? So, the development cycle of Flutter is can be summarized by these four words: build, tweak, hot reload, and repeat. We will come into what hot reload means a bit later. Well, first of all, 3 points. Flutter dev cycle is quick. It uses a declarative approach, which is very similar to contemporary cross-platform uh, app app frameworks like React, which makes it easier to make sense of the UI code and the prototype. So those of you don't know what declarative programming really is, declarative effectively means that you define what you want to see and where you want to see it, and the framework handles everything from rendering and speaking with the system if it really needs for you. You don't need to care about that at all. Uh, to prototype really means that the the declarative structure of Flutter code base, it is, once you get the hang of it, is really easy to visualize. So if you uh, are well acquainted with Flutter, even if you go into somebody else's project using Flutter, by looking at the layout, you can easily make sense of how the app will look like. Uh, Prototyping comes into play that you look into a layout, and if you instantly recognize how your app code base would look like. uh, Going to hot reload, which we will look later, um, it makes iterating upon designs much quickly. It's fast. Subsequent hot reload, much faster iteration upon designs and prototypes. This was in connection to the point I made previously. Uh, so hot reload enables us to make apps in Flutter very quickly. It's creative, a custom first approach, much easier expression through UI. This, as I said earlier, owing to material theming and Flutter's open source code base, it is very easy for any designer to express themselves through UI and implement it through Flutter easily. So before we begin, we need to look at something called Dart. Now, what is Dart? Dart is, first of all, the language that all Flutter apps are written with. It is an object-oriented, class-based, garbage-collected language. It has static typing, but also has inferred typing. So, as much as learning a new language for using a framework might not be good news for everyone, you don't really need to start from scratch using Dart. I would say if you know the concepts of object-oriented programming, you are good to go. Dart uses something called just-in-time compiling for debugging your apps, whereas it uses ahead-of-time compiling for deploying your release builds. Not really necessary in a beginner's perspective. You don't really need to worry about that, but just something to throw out there. And syntactically, this is the important one for those who looking to start learning Flutter. Dart is equivalent to something a mixture of Java, JavaScript, and C++. So we'll look at a code snippet over here and see what if it really means. So we have classes just like any typical programming language. We have data members, we have constructors, and we have member functions, right? So looking at the syntax, it is very similar to something Java or JavaScript like. And but first I want to mention something over here, this underscore thingy. So this is something different in Dart. What it really does is makes a variable private. Well, private in the sense that you can still access this variable outside this person class, but uh, you cannot access it outside the file which this class is written. So we can say it is library wise private. So it is something very similar to the default access specifier in Java. So that's that. We have setters and getters just like any other languages, were defined by their special keywords, get and set. And something to look at is at the setter function we have this double question mark operator. Now this is something extra in Dart. uh, Although you don't really need to use it, but let me just give you the thing anyways. So what this double question mark effectively does is it assigns status to is enrolled if and only if status is not null. So if status is null, it will assign false instead. So it is something like uh, if status not null, then is enrolled equal to status, else is enrolled equal to false. So as I have said, you don't really need to use it. You can just simply use an if else statement over here, over there, and and it is okay. Um, Next up, something called the Flutter notation. This is very, I would say, familiar to JavaScript developers. So this is what this does is it means that this enrolled function, if I say it, returns the value of this variable. So the value of this variable or this variable itself. So it is something very similar to is enrolled, then country braces open, and then if I write inside it, return this dot is enrolled. It is the same as that. I can write that the thing I said in one line like this. That is why I have this bool return type over here. So we have student class which extends person. So what it does is it extends the person class. So it works similar to Java in this case, or any other language. If I say we have so a subclass constructor that calls a super constructor just like in C++, and the subclass can have its own data members or data member functions, or can override the functions of the superclass. Next, we come to something called void main, which is the top level function denoted that denotes the starting of execution. So here we see that something var const. This is very similar to JavaScript. So over here, then what here happens here is that the name variable is type inferred to be a string. In the case of pi, the const keyword in Dart effectively means that this pi is compile time constant. So it has to be a constant while it's compiling or before compilation. Now we have the print statement that prints a string in console. Simple stuff. Over here, we did something called string interpolation. So what it does is it substitutes the value of name. It recognizes the name, the any characters as a variable, the name of a variable, and substitutes the value of name over here. So we have another things called final variables. What it means is it is a runtime constant. So not really need to worry. It functions very similar to const, but then again it has some subtle differences with which we don't need to worry about in this talk right now. But there's that, and you can see some other examples of string interpolation where I used curly braces. So what this curly braces does is that it encloses the entire expression. So if I do not use curly braces, dart will only take this. In the case of bar dot weight in pounds function, uh, dart will only take this bar as a variable and print dot weight in pounds as it is. So we need to enclose expressions in curly braces to prevent that. More information about Dart, if you like, can be found in this link. You can go over there. It gives you a tour of the Dart language. Just says over there in the web page itself. Uh, if you are very well versed in Java, JavaScript, or C++, it will be a breeze to go through. So hot reload, something which every time comes up when someone mentions Flutter. So speaking perspective of the native Android native, so the developers. So when you deploy your app and find that you have some errors, or the app just throws an exception, uh, you you typically stop the app, then you make the changes, and then you deploy it again, right? So yeah, and you know how deploying an native Android app works. So most of the time is consumed in Gradle building, right? So you can see that as we iterate upon our app designs, uh, Gradle takes a lot of time of development. So what Flutter does is that the owing to the just-in-time compilation and of Dart VM, yeah, suppose you have a problem on your app, so you need something in your app to change. So you go into a code base, you change it, and then you press a button to reload. So what Dart VM does is that it reloads the files that you changed and pushes it to the Dart engine over here. The Dart engine takes the instruction from the VMs to, we need to rebuild, right? So the user has requested for a hot reload to rebuild the app. So it rebuilds the app from top to bottom, and your changes are instantly reflected. This takes a matter of seconds. So let me just show you how it works. Of my app, right? So I'm using VS Code for I'm using VS Code. It is up to you whether you want to use other IDs or not. What is your preferred ID? You can just let's do a poll in the chat while we wait for Gradle to debug here. Oh, it is done. Very good. Okay, can you see the app? Can you guys see the app? That's what I'm asking about. So I hope that you can see the app running in my phone. So let us change something in there. So let's make the app bar red, right? So I changed here. The app bar still hasn't updated. So and then I hit a button, and the changes are instantly reflected over here. Let's do something else. Make the text over here a bit bigger. So again, what I'm doing here is not the concern. So if you don't understand what I'm doing, don't worry. We will get to that in some future talk. And here you can see the text has increased. So you can see what I trying to get right. So you change something in your app, and you hit a button, and then your changes will be instantly reflected. Flutter hot reload doesn't ends in just changing one or two apps. You can even swap out entire screens with different widgets, and it will do that job instantly. So I wrote this article months ago about describing this dev cycle. Um, it goes a bit into depth in what hot reload is and how it works and why Flutter dev cycle is fast and all the things. You can go look check that out if you want. Okay, so said that, let's get to coding finally. So previously, in the previous session, you seen how a app that we are going to build is gonna look like. So this is the Notify app that we are gonna build in Flutter. So you can see that it has its usual tabs. It has a search bar. It has a drawer, as you can see over here. So you can see that we are going to build this app, right? So, but for this talk, we are going to do something very simple. So it just has an app bar and a text, right? So how are we going to implement that? Well, first we need to think about widgets. Now, Flutter has a lot of widgets. Uh, Nobody has been able to keep the count. You can check this link over here, and it will list you all the widgets that Flutter has in its sleeve, under its sleeve, I would say, and you can see how these widgets work. Now, what is a widget actually? So I can say that widgets compose the UI. So widgets are the building blocks of the layout that you see. So over here we have the familiar counter app. So we can see it has an app bar. It has some text over here in the center. It has a floating action button, right? Uh, Simple stuff. So this entire UI of the widget is built by this app bar. In this app bar, it has a text. This app bar also has a body, if you would say, the main content, and it has a floating action button. So this sets of widgets come together and compose this entire UI. On the right hand side here, we have something called the widget tree. Now, what is a widget tree? Widget tree tells is a representation, you would say, of an the layout of the Flutter app in terms of who contains who, and positioning and stuff like that. So in this case, we have this top level my app here. This entire thing can be considered as an entire widget if we look at it like that. So this my app here is composed of these three widgets. So we have this app bar, we have this center, we have this floating action button. Now, what is the center? It is something like
a div element that is made to vertically and horizontally position is the content inside it to be centered. It is easier. It is easier in Flutter than in CSS. That is clear. But yeah, so the app bar has a text inside it, and the center has a column. Now, what is a column? The column is a widget is that layouts the widgets inside it one on top of other vertically. So as you can see, we have this pair of text, the positions one on top of other. These are the I would these are the contents of this column, and this floating action button has a single contains a single widget which is an icon. Now, a terminology that widget that is under a widget in this widget tree is known as the child of that particular widget tree. So, taking an example, this column is a child of center widget. This icon is a child of this floating action button widget. This text is a child of this app bar widget. In case of multiple widgets, we can say that they are children. So in this case, these two text widgets are the children of this column. So there's that. Uh, so how a widget is not, so saying that, you might say that widgets are something like views, right? So in native Android we have something called views which does the same thing. It represents the building blocks of the layout, right? So thinking about that, you might say that you can do something like this. So suppose I have a text is meant to display hello world, uh, but I want to greet my viewers. So in that case, I can just change the contents of the properties of that widget to display hello everybody, right? Well, turns out you can do that in Flutter. Yeah, Flutter doesn't allow us you to do that because widgets are immutable. What I mean by immutable is that uh, the entire thing, so the entire object, if you would call it that way, the widget is const from top to bottom. If you will like to call it that way, you cannot change any properties of that widget. They're immutable. This is one of the reasons what makes hot reload possible, but that is something very that I can explain very later. But yeah, so taking the above example, what you would really do with Flutter is uh, construct different objects depending upon the context. So if I can write an if else statement here. So if greet viewers is true, then I can use hello everybody, or else I can use hello world. So yeah, so you cannot mutate the widgets; they're immutable, and you need to construct different widgets according to context. So here is our app that we are going to build and its corresponding widget tree. So you can see over here that it has the top level widget my app that is represents the entire this app, and then we have the app bar, and inside we have the text, and then we have the container. In it we have the text. These two pairs of these two widgets have text in each one of them. So I have marked that here, so you can see that for yourself. So this is how typically an Android developer would do. Because I'm sorry, Flutter developer would look for. So as Flutter is UI focused first, so when a Flutter developer would typically think about the layout first before coding a single line of writing a single line of code. Because yes, so you first develop the UI and then you construct the logic. It is most of the Flutter developers do it that way. The layout, the breaking of layouts into boxes and columns and rows are the first thing that a Flutter developer does. This article written by one of Flutter's GDs Puja Bhomik is a must read for beginners who want to start learning about how to uh, break your layouts in rows and columns. Uh, and it goes a bit of depth into how what a widget actually is. So you can read that up. Now, doing learning about what widgets really are, let's get to coding for real. So let me bring up my terminal. So to create a Flutter project, what you would need to do is first step, go into your folder in which you want to create the Flutter project. Let me increase the text over here, which might be useful for you guys. Okay, so yeah, so first of all, go into your Flutter. I mean the project, the folder in which you want to create a Flutter project, and then you Flutter run, and then your project name. Let's name it Intro to Flutter. Oops, no, I'm sorry, not Flutter run, but Flutter create. Yeah, so Flutter create, and it creates the files that we need to run our Android project or any platform or for any platform. So after it has done, let's cd into it, and then open our favorite editor. So let me show you the project structure, what it creates. That one. So you can so you can see that the project structure that the Flutter creates involves a lot of folders and a couple of files. For this talk, we need to really focus on this lib folder. Now, what this lib folder contains is the entire source code of your Flutter app. This lib folder will contain your Flutter, all the Dart files that you create while creating a Flutter app. Now, this is the same. This is the code of the same app that we have seen, the counter app. As I've said, it creates default for your app for any new project. So let us try to build from scratch. First of all, what we need to do is import the material package. Now, what does this has is it has the entire Flutter widgets and that follow the material design guidelines. You can so that we can use them in our Flutter app. If you like to use the iOS design, that you need to import Dot. Yeah, so this you need to import Cupertino.dart if you want to use iOS design. The human interface guidelines that iOS and Apple products uses. But we are not going to use that because material design is very customizable. So next thing we need to do is define the void main function, which is the starting point of any Dart program. In it, we need to run the app. Self-explanatory. So what it really needs is the app that we need, that the widget that we need to signify that yes, this is our app that we need to run. Just like we had my app, the top level widget. So in this case, let's name is notify. Now, what is actually widget in code? It is a Dart class, you can say, which extends a special type of class known as a stateless widget. So extending this class makes this Dart class a widget. Now, what a typical widget needs to override to extend any type of widget is this build function. We'll look into what stateless widget and other type of widgets are later. But yeah, so you need to override this build function to uh, make this dot class a widget. So in this this build function actually what it does is it just returns. Notice the widget return data type here. It just returns the set of widgets that we need to we require to build this widget. So in this case, we can say that this container widget is used to build this notify widget. Now, what is a container widget? Let us see that in the docs. Still not good. Okay, so we are here the online Flutter docs. So let us search for container. Container class, a convenience widget that combines common paintings, positioning, and sizing widgets. It does not give away that much, but we'll take that. So a container class, effectively, what it does is behaves like a div element of HTML. So it has some padding, it has margin, it has height, it has width, stuff like that, right? So it is kind of like a div element. So and it contains a widget inside it. So in this case, let us give it a child for it to contain text. Let's name it hello. Right. So I can go a bit depth into here, but we are running out of time. So let me just search for another widget. So that there is something called material app. What this material app is an application that uses material design. That's it. So we need to use material design in our app. For that, we need to wrap the material app widget. Now the material app widget does not has a child parameter. It instead contains a home parameter. Now this home parameter, what it does is effectively tells us that we need to see this container widget the first time when we launch our app after the splash screen, right? So let me go back to slides. Yeah, so this is how a typical widget tree looks like in code. So we have this top level app, my app here, and then it has the app bar and container as its children. You can say this app bar and container define the my app widget, and in it we have two text widgets. So this is how it will look like when translated in code. So this enclosing and nesting is typically what a Flutter layout file looks like. So you have the enter my head enclosed in enclosing an app bar and a container, each of which has a child called text. This is a general example of the layout, the structure of the Flutter app, as you can see. So let me go back to the code. So a material app effectively is what, let me show you the actual, okay, just leave it for now. Go back, let's go back to slides instead. Okay, so material app is what I call, what it is actually a derivation of a top level app known as Widgets app in Flutter. Now what it is that it defines the, the actual enclosing of Flutter so that it can run in on top of an Android runner or an iOS runner on any other platform, if you would say. So this widgets app is kind of like an enclosing of Flutter app. So it has two types. If you are using a material design, we need to use material app. But if you are importing Cupertino.dart and we need the iOS design, we use the Cupertino app. So it is just like that. So going back to slides again, I mean the code again. So all's good, but we need to make an app, right? So Flutter gives us a template, if you would say. The widget serves as a template that is known as scaffold. Now, this what this scaffold does is provides convenience parameters for us. For example, it has an app bar, it has body, it has a bottom navigation bar, it has a floating action button, it has a drawer. So you can see each of them. You can visually map out what each of them would represent. So we need to display the container in body, right? So we don't need this right now, and let's just give it an app bar widget, which represents an app bar. Okay, let's run this app. Let us see how it looks. For that, we need to type in flutter run flutter run, and that's it. Now we need to just wait for Gradle to do his job. As I've said, this is hot. In spite of hot reload being done, we need to at least deploy our app once to our testing device, so that we need Gradle in this case. But we will see later that for changing or adding something in our app, we just need to change it and press a button to make hot reload work. In the meantime, let me go back to chat. So, is there anything? Can you inspect element on a web app? Uh, I I haven't used web that much, but Flutter does have something called widget inspector. I don't know if it is available on web or not, but yeah, I wouldn't be the person to. I actually don't actually have no experience with that much experience with webs to say something about that. Difference between constant and final. So let me go back to the slides for that. Uh, so let me. So hi. So difference between constant and final is that suppose over here you can see that I made this bar variable final, right? So even if I made this bar variable final, bar variable final, I can still change the properties of this student object. So, but that can be said of this const if I make this student const, right? So if I make this student const, that will not allow me to change the properties of the app, properties of the object. But in case of final, it does that. Final effectively what it does is, so making this thing final means that this bar variable will always point, this will always have a reference to this object and this object alone, but it doesn't know about anything about, I would say, uh, the properties of the same object. So it final allows changing properties of that object, but const doesn't. Okay, looks like our app is ready. Let me go back to. Okay, so yeah, you can see over here our app is running and good. Size them. Okay, so it is an app bar. It has a body in which we have a text. Simple, right? So let me just add a text widget in here. So title, what it represents is, if I, so I have changed something over here. We will get to see what title is a bit soon. So I have changed something over here. So if I just hot reload, as you can see, I can instantly add that. So the title parameter so is represented by what you see in a typical app over here. So it represents the title of the app bar. So let me next up, let me give it a style to style the text. Give it a font size. So just like any other HTML element, we some of the widgets have a style property in which we can define styles for that particular widget. So in this case, I'm passing it a text style object. In here, I can write something font size 72. Save that. Below, as you can see, the text size is increased. How about positioning the this text in center? For that, container has something on alignment. In here, we pass an alignment enum. The alignment enum has alignment enum has various members. You can see the center, center left, bottom left. eh, Most common positions that you would like to have, right? So let me give it a center and reload, and there is it. We can it has been centered. How about changing the color of the app bar? Background color, suppose colors dot gray. As you can see, we can change our properties in the app, and it instantly is reflected in the the unit texting device. So what did we see? Flutter makes developing apps easy, even for a newbie. Flutter is open source with good docs, great for understanding, even better for contribution. A win-win. And if you know some what Java, JavaScript, or C++ is, you really don't need to reinvent the wheel and start learning Dart. You already know much Dart, so you can code full-fledged Flutter apps. Hot reload is the real deal, as you have seen. Think in widgets, code in widgets, eat in widgets, sleep in widgets. So Yeah, so if you are talking about Flutter, you need to think in widgets. What does this mean for other frameworks? Is Flutter the death of every other cross-platform framework or any other native framework? Well, not exactly. Flutter, although has it is good to develop apps in, it has some nuances. Is it The Flutter team and the community are working hard to make the developer experience on par with something native. And as far as I have used a bit of React, and I think that some of the syntactic designs that React implements are convey a concept of reactive programming a bit better than that of Flutter. So where to start? Well, Flutter has a ton of widgets. Don't try to learn every one of them. So the docs, the online docs or the offline docs in the code base will be always there for you. So you can, so if you ever encounter any problem, you can search the docs, Google or search the Stack Overflow. They will be there for you to work to figure your solution out. Start simple, use scaffolds, constant, all these containers, text, rows, and columns to create layouts. You don't need to learn, just I have said, don't need to learn every widget. Start simple. If you like code along with video tutorials, read more articles, but don't create a carbon copy. Introduce a bit of flavor from your side. Some of the good tutorials often mention one or two things that you can do with the widgets in question. Use them to your advantage. Okay, so finally, some resources to help you through. So this is the official Flutter uh, website. You can go over there and just go through the docs or get started to get your own Flutter installation set up. Here, this is the online docs that I was mentioning about. So you can look the Flutter docs over here.